I love limitations. It may sound really weird, but there is something beautiful about limitations. When you think about it, sports, games, just about everything we do, we set parameters around them. How many of you would consider yourself a visual thinker? Do you see things in your mind more, you think, than maybe the average person does? Yeah. I saw a thing, this ancient Disney movie called The Great Locomotive Chase when I was like 5 years old. And the next day I was reenacting it with my red flyer wagon on the street, doing all the characters, and I had my locomotive. And in my mind, it was so amazing. I've always seen things like that. It took me years to realize maybe I'm made this way for a reason. I wanted close-ups. And when two people are in a huddle and they're talking about something, I wanted to be looking up at them. So gradually speaking, I began to realize I want people to see what I see. At Cal State Long Beach, I had met one of my heroes, the producer of the Time Machine, George Pal. I don't know if any of you guys know the name. George Pal is one of the pioneers of fantasy and science fiction movies. I said, "What's your advice to me, Mr. Pal, my pal?" And he said, "My advice to you is when you don't find a way, make a way." My mentor, Janet Burrows, is an amazing woman who went on to produce a whole string of very, very successful television miniseries. Janet took me under her wing and taught me how to write treatments and how to pitch. And she said, "All right, this is what you need structurally. You need to reinforce the arc here. It's kind of drooping in the middle." And she basically taught me the process. And I had this idea, brilliant, in my humble but correct opinion. And Janet said, I'll never forget, she looked at me and she said, "You're fired." I said, "What? But this is what you've taught me to do." "Okay, I used your name, but. And then she grinned and she said, "See, you're an intern with us. If you present this to me as an intern, you'll get a pat on the back. Good job. And that will be it. But if you go home and put on a nice jacket and come back tomorrow and pitch it to me as an independent producer, we'll give you $200,000 and we'll sign a production deal with you. But you can't be our intern anymore if you're going to do that." And I said, "I quit." And I left and I came back and I thought I was in business. Once I learned the ropes and started to make friends, I ran into a snag I didn't see coming. I found out that Hollywood is a private club. I pitched an idea to Universal Pictures. I thought it was a pretty great idea. They were going back and remaking modern versions of all their old classic Universal monsters. But they hadn't done The Mummy yet. And I said, "That's the best one because now you have the effects technology to do it right. And the name is golden. Everybody remembers, but the old one is the worst of all the old. It's terrible. It's boring, the old original Mummy movie. But the name is golden and the idea, the premise of this guy comes back from the dead and an eternal bride and all this kind of cool stuff, right?" And I pitched it, and they said, "We don't think we're going to do that. No, that didn't sound like a good idea." 6 months later, somebody else pitched it, and they went, "Wow, what an idea!" And they made it. It was their biggest moneymaker of the decade. What was the difference? Freshmen had never had anything produced. The guy that produced it, pitched it to them 6 months after me, had like 15 successful feature films. Why would they take a chance on a guy who's never produced a feature film before? So coming from me, it was a bad idea. Coming from this guy with his track record, it was a brilliant idea. It took me so long to realize that I wasn't a member of the club. One thing I did produce finally in LA before I left was a movie for Showtime. But the thing is, I still had no clout. There was one final thing. It was kind of like the last straw. I had this amazing little noir drama called Hide Your Love Away with this incredibly cool twist of an ending to it. And we got Bruce Willis attached at the time. This was just a little before Sixth Sense. We were ready to go, and we had a guy who was going to put in the key money up front. He was going to put in $1 million up front. He was an independent producer, executive producer. The night that the money was supposed to go into the bank so that the next day we could start writing checks and start working our way towards pre-production on the film. The friend, Jack, who put the deal together, called and said, the deal's off. His wife found him in bed with his mistress and shot him. And my wife says, God, if you don't want us to do it, just say something. You know, I mean, you don't have to kill people. You know, he didn't die, but his money was a little tied up from that point on. So we were back, and that was the last straw. Hollywood was in a slump at the time. So I relocated my family to Cincinnati, Ohio. The moral of the story, when I woke up, and it took me a long time to process this, was have faith in your vision. Have faith in what it is you think you're wired for and what you're called to do, but don't necessarily expect it to play out the way you think it's going to. And so I said, well, let's make a way. I found out Doritos does an annual contest, or they did then, called Crash the Super Bowl. If you make a commercial they really like, they'll give you $1 million and they'll air it during Super Bowl. I got to be friends with a guy who is probably the best known director of photography in this area, Jeff Barklage. When I called Jeff about this Doritos ad, I said, Jeff, I can't pay you. I mean, you get a fortune for what you do. I can't pay you, but I'll give you a share of the winnings. And everybody worked for free on it because relationships almost instantly, it seemed, right after we finished producing that, I got a call from a producer. I do some acting too. You can tell I'm very theatrical. And when the film was done, he knew that I had been a producer and a director and a screenwriter. And Mike said, so tell me, what do you got? Pitch me. All of a sudden, I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio, and doors that were closing before are starting to open. I pitched, and it was like Christmas time. It was right before New Year's. At the end of 2013, Mike calls and says, you're green lighted. We're doing a feature film. We're doing your movie. Get to work on it. Learn by doing. Learn by doing. Learn by solving problems. I was doing a movie called My Declaration one time, and there were 4 monologues about 4th of July. One person didn't know her line. She couldn't get through more than a sentence. Out of desperation, I took all 4 of the monologues and I blew them up, and I broke them up into pieces where they all 4 were delivering one monologue. One person would say 1 or 2 sentences, and the other person would continue the sentence. And it saved the movie because I could only use the pieces that she did that she could get right and put it together. But you know what? It's better. In Notzilla, as I did my research on it, we're making fun of the kaiju movies, but also making fun of old American monster movies. It takes place in the early 60s. And we're making fun of low-budget, indie-type movies that were shot back then on shoestring budget. Actually, the original Godzilla, even the original one, and the ones that came later had even more money, would have actually had about an $11 million budget in modern dollars. And so they had miniatures that were this big, with great detail, handmade for the movie. We didn't have the time or the money for that. We had the time to buy and tweak toys for the movie. So we owned it. We went with it. We made fun of it. Instead of trying to be embarrassed about the fact we don't really look as real. It's a spoof. Spoofs exaggerate. We exaggerated the phoniness. When jets come in, we can kind of make out the wires the jets are flying from, or hanging on. The monster reaches up and grabs the wire and snips it. Any decent director worth their salt is the only person there who really has the movie in their head. The movie is playing in their head. Yes, it gets changed. It's being edited as it goes, but they know what they need. Healing River, there's a segment in the middle of the movie that's the heart of the movie. The day we shot would have been a train wreck if we hadn't had hours of rehearsal the week before, because what happened was some of the equipment we needed didn't come, and we didn't start our shoot day until noon. And they had 6 hours to shoot 27 pages of screenplay. It would have been a complete wreck, except A, the really, really gifted actors that I was working with, and B, they had that rehearsal time. So it saved us, and we were able to piece it together, patch it together, and make it work beautifully in the movie. It could have destroyed the movie if we hadn't had the rehearsal time. So rehearsal matter. Fit the process to the project. We're doing Healing River. I knew I wanted it to be emotional. It's an emotional story. I mean, people have seen the movie say, man, I went through an entire box of Kleenex on this one. There's nothing I would rather hear as a storyteller than your stories have impacted me on the deepest level. So we used, right up front, we used tons of Steadicam. The camera's just constantly moving around and moving in on people. When we were doing Notzilla, it's supposed to be 1962, so there's no camera movement. It's all zoom. It's zoom happy. Because it was in the late 50s that they finally developed a dependable, usable zoom lens for 35 millimeter cameras. And Hollywood went zoom crazy. Who needs dollies? No, the dolly is a thing of the past. The fact that a zoom feels completely different from a camera moving in on something, it's not intimate. There's nothing intimate. But we played with that. We made fun of that. So we have all kinds of smash zooms. Like when somebody says something that's shocking, the camera goes zoom. Michael Curtiz was working with a stage actor who'd never done a film before. And the guy said, "How do I act for the camera?" And he said, "Don't. Just think it. The camera will see it." And it's true. So I told David, this very good stage actor who works all the time professionally on the stage in Cincinnati, I said this, do what Curtiz said. Just think. Stop acting. Don't act. Just think. We'll see it. We'll see it. And then David played the General Bogus in Notzilla a couple years later when we shot that. And I said, remember what I told you about don't act, with Healing River? David, forget that. Because it's a different movie with a different feel. And everything's ridiculously overly dramatic. When Steve Goers was first writing the score, he was trying to make it funny. And I said, don't make it funny. We're making fun of a deadly serious movie. There's a monster attacking. It's the end of the world. And so the music has to go, da-da, not da-da-da-da. Don't make it funny. Let it be funny. Fit the process to the project. Probably the main thing we had to do with Notzilla that was very different, I had to storyboard my little brains out. It's 4 layers deep, and you couldn't make it up as you go along. You had to decide in advance and say, okay, first we shoot this, then we project it behind this as we shoot those 2 layers, then we shoot a 3rd layer in front of that, and finally a 4th layer in front of that. There was nothing like that needed to be done in the drama that I had done before that. I especially found how important coverage was when I shot a little documentary on a 96-year-old lady who makes quilts to give to poor people. But she also has very little to say, and when I interviewed her, I had to drag a lot out of her, and I got just little curt answers. Not because she was senile or anything like that, but because she just thought this was all really silly, this guy interviewing her for this silly footage, And so I'd say, you must feel a great sense of satisfaction. And she'd go, yeah. Okay, So then I kind of started teasing her. And she'd go, oh, stop it. And oh, I like that. I'm going to use that. And then I thought, I'm going to need other stuff. So I got lots of shots of her hands working on the quilts. Lots of shots of things in her house and objects. Just thinking, I don't know if I'll need these things. I used all of them because they gave me things to cut away to. Cut to a shot of a teddy bear or something sitting in a corner of her house. And that just exemplified, I love children. And we're looking at that. And it's also because I had really nothing more that I could show a footage of her. The head of a local quilting guild said she produces 10 times as many quilts as anybody else. So every time the lady talked about her and how productive it is, I would cut back to her, and every time her hands, we kept speeding it up. Her hands would be quilting faster and faster. And it's charming. You're not sure how you're going to put these pieces together, but get lots of them. When we were shooting Healing River, they didn't think we needed anything except the story elements. It's no, that's not the way movies work. You need to put us into the world of the story. We went back and we did 5 days of pickup shots after that film. We got 60 shots, and all of them ended up in the movie. Use your limitations as tools. Use the things that you don't have to make you think of the stuff that would be even better than what you would have. You need to go do something. You need to create your own magic, go create your own scene, and then somewhere along the line, you need to produce that something that is a breakout, that has the audience on their feet at Tribeca or at Toronto or at Sundance Film Festival. You need to produce that little low-budget indie that blows away the representatives from the studios that are there, and they will hand you their card, and they're saying, join our club.